So the question we pose is, how can we find out the price to charge for the checking account so that zero money invested is zero money earned? So we can start with some simple concepts. So let's name the price that's the appropriate price for the checking account, paying $110 in a year as price, a variable price like X in an algebra equation. So price we don't know. One thing we can though state some facts about some of the other pieces of information in this problem. So how much are we going to borrow from the bank? Well, that's easy. We're going to borrow exactly the price of the checking account. Now, I'm going to borrow from the bank, immediately turn that money around, and buy the checking account. So I'm going to borrow that much from the bank, which also means if I were to ask, how much will I owe the bank in 1 year? Well, the answer to that question is, how much do I have to, I'll label that PB, how much do I have to pay back the bank? We have to pay back what we borrowed, so we have to pay back the bank price. That's the dollar amount that we borrowed. But we also have to pay back the interest on price. We said that that interest was 5%, so take 5% of the price, and that's an additional amount I'll have to pay back. So we can simplify that to be price times 1 plus 0.05. That's the distributive property at work. So we've got an amount for how much we have to pay back the bank expressed in the terms of the price we paid for the checking account. So now I can ask a different question. How much will I get from the account? So that's going to be equal to 110. Because that was set in the original information in the problem. So we're going to get $110 from this checking account. And if it's priced correctly, that means that that 110 is going to equal the amount we have to pay back to the bank. Remember, if it's not, right, if we have money left over, then we would love to do this deal and we'll do it over and over and over again and get lots of free money. If it's too low, then the opposite happens and we have to pay every time and we never would. So in order for this to make sense, since we're investing zero money in this investment, we ought to get $0 in return at the end. And that means that my payment to the bank at the end of this process needs to be equal to the payment I receive from my checking account. So if 110 equals to the payment to the bank, and the payment to the bank is equal to this expression here, I can combine those two things and say 110 is equal to price times, simplify again, 1.05. Right? 1 plus 0.05 is 1.05. So this is a simple expression. We can solve for it. So 110, we'll divide both sides by 1.05. So price is equal to 110 divided by 1.05. $104.76. So what was that? That was the price of a checking account paying $110 in 1 year that makes sense given that the market rate of interest available for risk-free loans is 5%. So having a 5% borrowing opportunity available means that $110 in a year is worth $104.76. And the reason that works is effectively what we've created for this person selling the checking account is a borrowing opportunity. They sell an account with a promise to pay money in the future. So they get money up front in exchange for a promise to pay in the future, and that's a loan. So the market rate of interest on the loan, 5%, ought to apply to you just as well as it applies to everyone else. And so what that does then is defines a value in present terms of a future cash flow. So $110 is future money. So in time 1, that is worth $110. At time 0, $110 is worth $142.76. That makes cash flows that arrive at different times comparable. You have a preference between $105 now or $110 in the future. You prefer the $105 now without exception because it's worth more than $110 in the future according to the market rate of interest. And that's important. So you may have a personal preference for $104.76 or $105. I mean, maybe you don't need money now and you know you're going to need money in the future. So your personal preferences may direct you towards 110. But the fact of the matter is that if you really felt that way, you could recreate that cash flow by lending at the market rate of interest and do better by taking that 105, lending it, and do better at the end. And so even though we all have different time preference for when our money shows up, and we may be more impatient or less impatient, no matter what our preferences are for when our money shows up, the market rate of interest will dictate exactly how much cash flows are worth today, because people will borrow and lend to make it that way.